Hello, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a game by the name of Ohanami. This is put out by NSV. This is a German edition, although they do have English rules for the game available on their website, so feel free to import it. It is a small box card game where players are going to be taking cards with numbers on them, trying to draft them in a way that will maximize their points. The big wrinkle in the game is essentially you'll have 3 rows of cards in front of you, but you cannot add cards that are not either higher or lower than the highest or lowest numbers in those cards. So it's a competitive drafting game. It's designed by Steffen Benndorf, who is a designer of a lot of nice filler length card games over the last few years, such as Quicks, such as The Game. This is very much in that same sphere. It's maybe a 20-minute game or so. The box actually says 20 minutes. That's about right. And it plays from 2 to 4 players. Box says ages 8 and up, which seems appropriate. I'll take a few minutes, show you how it works, and then come back and let you know what I think about the game. The game Ohanami comes with a deck of 120 cards as well as a scoring pad, and this deck of cards has the numbers 1 through 120. Each of them appears once, and each card has on it, associated with it, a scoring symbol. So there are 4 different scoring symbols that will score differently. Some of them will score more often at the end of every round. Some of them will only score at the end of the game. And the scoring pad lays that out rather nicely. You can see here. So the game's played over 3 rounds. The blue cards are going to score you 3 points every round. So if you get them out in the first round, they'll be worth 9 points, whereas the gray cards, for example, will only score for you 7 points, but they'll only score for you at the end of the 3rd round. So they're only worth 7 maximum points over the whole game. The pink cards only score at the end of the game, and they'll score for you as a set depending on how many you get. So there's a grid here. You can see, for example, if you had 9 of them, they would be worth 45 points. So the game's a drafting game, and at the start of a round, each player is going to get 10 cards, just shuffled at random, and they're going to pick 2 of these cards that they want to keep. So let's say this player might choose to take this one, or maybe this one and this one, because generally you'll want cards that are next to each other, so a 66 and a 67 would be a good pull. Then you'll take those and pass those to your left, face down. Once every player's picked their 2 cards, you'll simultaneously reveal them, and you could play 0, 1, or 2 of these. So you're not obligated to play any of them, but you could play up to both of them. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay them down in columns in front of you, and you could have up to 3 columns going in front of you. So the rule is that essentially any card that you add to your columns has to essentially be lower than your lowest card in the column or higher than the highest card in the column. So you cannot insert cards in between what you already have there. So a 66, 67 is good because you could grow on either side and you're not foregoing any options. So sort of like the Lost Cities if you played that game. Then the player would get past 8 cards and they would have to pick 2 of these to play. So maybe they would take, for example, this would be very obvious at the start, maybe this 81 and 82. They could take those, pass their cards, players will simultaneously reveal, and then play 0, 1, or 2 of those cards. So this player could play the 81 and 82 up here in this row, or they could start a new row. Again, you could have up to 3 rows, so this would be maybe be their 2nd row, and then the player would get past 6 cards, and this would go until a player gets past 2 cards and they have to choose what they want to do with those last 2 cards for the end of the round. So here, now you can see the choices start getting a little bit more difficult. So a 72 would be good for either here or here. That would probably be good, but then these other cards don't especially work well, so they probably want to just start another row. Maybe they could take the 28. And then when the players would simultaneously reveal, they would maybe put the 28 by itself over here and add the 72 up here. So this will go 5 times. Then you'll have your first round scoring where every blue card that you've placed will be worth 3 points. So this would be worth 3 points. The other cards would not score yet. So again, the green cards don't start scoring until round 2. The gray cards don't start scoring until round 3. So the second round is basically the same thing, except that you'll be passing the other way. So you'll still get 10 cards, take 2, pass to your right this time until you have cards in front of you, or until you have gone through all the cards. And again, always you're able to play up to 2 of those cards. You could discard cards out that you either don't want to play in front of you or you don't want the player that you're passing to have. So eventually, as you're adding cards to your display, it will become more difficult. So sometimes you might be forced to discard because you won't have any valid plays. At the end of the game, you simply will tally up your points. So you'll have your scorings from your first 2 rounds, and then you'll do your final scoring, which now includes the gray cards as well as the pink cards. Whoever has the most points at the end of that will be the winner. Alright, so that is Ohanami. And like the other games that this designer has made, this is a pleasant filler game that is easy to teach and rather enjoyable to play. I think that it is entering into a relatively crowded field. There are a lot of these 20-minute card games that you can play. And there are ones that use very similar rule sets. I think the most famous of them would be like Lost Cities, which is a 2-player game, but there's a 4-player Keltis card game, which is relatively similar to this, except it does not have that pass and draft mechanism, which is central to this one. I do think that I would probably prefer to play that to this because that gives you more angst and more in the decisions that you're making. Here, for the most part, you could, certainly hose yourself early on if you play badly, but generally, you're only near the end of the first round going to start feeling the ramifications of your decisions. And it's mostly a pleasant game to play. You're going to, try to maximize your points. But generally, most things that you're going to be doing are going to be giving you points because you have 3 rows that you could build on. You're going to have a lot of forgiveness in early on, so you'll have a lot of spaces to move. It's only going to be generally those last few moves where you feel like, oh, I can't play any of these cards possibly, and not always even in that case will that come up for all players. Over the games of this that I've played, generally it's been a really tight scoring game, although some of those cards will score fewer points for more rounds, and some will score more points only at the end of the game. You're going to want to I feel like those generally tend to equalize out. Most of the scores have been relatively close, which is pretty good, but it does mean that to a certain degree it does feel like it's up to, either A, luck, or B, how closely the player who's passing you cards is paying attention. That's going to determine your success in this game, which is fine. This is a relatively, lightweight, 20-minute filler game, but I think that it lacks another element of strategy. It's usually pretty obvious, like I was showing you in the play demonstration I was doing. If you get a 65 and a 66 or something like that in your first hand, you probably will put those 2 cards down. The only real strategic element of this game, I would say, there's certainly tactical choices to be made, choosing not to pass somebody something that you would really benefit them. But the only real strategic element is whether or not you want to go into those pink cards, because those use a triangular scoring, so they could really pay off by the end of the game. But if the people who are sitting next to you are also collecting pink cards, you may not want to do that because they'll be not passing you those cards. So thinking about that is a nice tiny little element of strategy that does exist in the game. But overall, I think that this is a really pleasant but not mind-blowing filler game. So those are my thoughts on Ohanami, and thank you for watching.